Welcome back. All right, so I was thinking over when the best time would be to do a power rankings to set up this coming season. I thought about doing it this Saturday, but Yvonne and I are going to a concert this Saturday, so that would leave me posting a power rankings video really, really late, even for me, and during the technically not quite the season, and two teams would have already played. It gets kind of messy. So I'm going to do this today. It is on a Monday. I've had people at times saying, oh, you should do them on Mondays, but I've kept them on Saturday nights. We'll see what the numbers look like for this. So 1 through 32, it is the puck board. The puck board being back tells you the season is upon us. I've got another board right in front of me right here, which has 1 through 32, so I don't need the book yet. That'll be for the next one. I won't be doing a power rankings, obviously, next Saturday, as said. I will be doing a power rankings the Saturday after that. So, 32nd spot, San Jose. The San Jose Sharks start out at the bottom this season. I don't expect them to be as bad as this past season. I think they're going to win more games. I think they're going to be better. I also don't think we're going to have teams that are playing as badly as the bottom 3 or 4 teams did this past season. I don't think we're going to see a full-out embrace of the tank necessarily, not right out of the gate. But we'll see. We'll see whether or not the number one prospect for 2025, if it does end up being Hagens, does Hagens generate that kind of excitement? I haven't done a video on Hagens yet, but that's coming. So, number 32 is San Jose. Number 31, new logo. And I got the puck there. That's the new logo right there, the Anaheim Ducks. So the Ducks are 31st on the board. Again, all is well in the universe when the bottom two are the Ducks and the Sharks. I don't think it's going to stay that way. Again, I kind of have to go with how the season ended and look at the rosters currently and all that, and not a lot of movement at the bottom, which includes, at number 30, Chicago Blackhawks. So the Blackhawks, number 30, I don't have to talk about who's moved up or moved down because this is the start for this season. This is where the power rankings really get started. So for people who haven't seen a power rankings where I'm talking about the season that's yet to come for a while, well, I guess I haven't done like a real normal power ranking since what, April? Yeah, April. It's a long time in between power rankings. All right, but number 30 is Chicago. I don't expect them to be a lot better, but I do expect them to be better. Number 29, who I'm not expected to be better, is Calgary. Go ahead and move that board over there. Just all the kinks I got to work out early, right? But number 29 is Calgary. I don't think Flame fans are going to be too upset with Calgary being number 29. This does mean the bottom 4 teams on the board are from the West. So number 29, the Calgary Flames, they're in this retool right now. I will term it that until we see guys getting traded that are veterans this season. If we see a bunch of veterans leaving again this year, then yeah, we're in full rebuild territory. But 29 for Calgary. And Calgary could very well end up being at the bottom of the standings this year. Again, depending on what happens, what kind of start they have and all that. Number 28, Columbus. So the first of the teams in the East is Columbus. They did add Monahan. Obviously, the passing of Johnny Gaudreau is something that's out there. It's going to hang over the league for the first couple of weeks at the very least. We know they're going to have the stickers on the helmets. There's going to be moments of silence. For Columbus now, it's about getting back to the hockey part of things. I do think that despite the tragedy, there is the chance Columbus is better this coming season. On paper, I think there's reason to be at least somewhat optimistic they won't have the same season they did this past year, but how much better will they be? Number 27. I keep wanting to say how much a team has dropped or risen. It's always weird when we get to this, but there's Montreal at 27. If I had posted Montreal at 27, say, a week ago, people would have been upset. In light of the Patrick Laine injury, there's the Reinbacher injury, the injury bug taking Montreal by storm already, and we haven't even got into the regular season yet. Montreal at 27. And full disclosure, I had them at 25 a week ago, but the loss of Patrick Laine and Reinbacher and just the way the injury bugs hit them already has for me downgraded the expectations I have for this coming season. I have them in 27th. Now I got my fingers crossed nothing happens to Kirby Dach. Number 26, Flyers. Philadelphia, still in the bottom row. What's interesting with Philadelphia is we know they're going to win their share of games because John Tortorella is an excellent coach. Still not likely to be a playoff team. The goaltending tandem is what really throws me with Philly. Fedotov might be really good. Ersson has at times looked pretty good, but the numbers from last season, and it is a small sample size with Fedotov, but not an encouraging sample, and definitely not encouraging numbers from Ersson either. So fingers crossed things get better for Philly. I don't like it when there's teams that are just absolutely awful. So I like it when everybody's close, and you can make an argument for almost any team making the playoffs. Rounding out the bottom row, number 25. And I might be completely wrong on this one. I hope I am, because my wife's a Minnesota Wild fan. So, oh, and for anybody wondering, I'm wearing a Chilliwack Bruins jersey. The Chilliwack Bruins didn't last that long, but I have a home and away for Chilliwack Bruins. But yeah, Minnesota at 25, and it just feels like with the Minnesota Wild, they're better than some of these teams here, but I can't make the argument for them ahead of the other teams on the board. And this is that place that I get caught where he just hates on these teams. No, I don't see it. So yeah, 25 is the Minnesota Wild on the board. So first row in. Normally there's no argument with the first row. I would imagine there will be this time around because the season hasn't technically started yet. So everybody's unbeaten right now. So number 24, starting the next row. Seattle Kraken. Seattle may very well be better than they were last season. There's reason to think that their scoring's going to jump back. But until that happens, it's hard for me to justify moving them up on the board. Now, I definitely have New Jersey higher than where they finished on the season. But once we get to New Jersey, I'll explain that. But for Seattle, I have them at 24th to start the season. Maybe they're one of those teams that jumps way up. Maybe it'll end up being accurate. We shall see. Number 23. I really hope I'm wrong on this one because Buffalo really needs playoffs. They haven't been in the playoffs since 2011. And another season of Buffalo being mediocre and not making it, that's kind of lame. I'd like to see a different storyline attached to the Buffalo Sabres this year. The problem being that half the league is going to miss the playoffs. So that means there are some good teams that miss. I think Buffalo, not this past season, but the season before, they were a pretty darn good team that just barely missed. I'd like to see them get in, even if it's just barely. As long as they're above the playoff line, that'd be fantastic. Number 22, St. Louis Blues. So the Blues, they were more competitive this past season than expected after that slow start. I still don't know if they're going to be a playoff team or not. Maybe the change of coach, maybe Bannister over a full season can get them there. Again, the starting point I have them at is 22nd. Be happy to be wrong on that one. But yeah, St. Louis, I don't know that I see them as being a better team this year. But again, that's the beauty of going from one year to the next. Things can completely change. Speaking of completely changed, number 21 on the board and making their debut, Utah. So there you go. Utah, not quite halfway, but I do think Utah is a good club. I think they got good goaltending, solid offense, some really good young stars, and their blue line, pretty darn good. I really do believe that Utah has the team that Arizona should have had for this coming season, and Arizona might have been playing games that were important into March. Who knows what kind of excitement that would have generated. But now you got a brand new market, you got a sold out building, and so we'll see how things go in Utah this season. But I have them starting at 21. At 20, the Sens, Ottawa. So, looking at Ottawa and the offseason they had, obviously picking up Ullmark's going to help. So that may very well drive him into the top 16. I still have some concerns with the experience level on the blue line. I could throw that in there. There are various concerns, but in general, I think Ottawa's going to be in the mix. I think, really honestly, I can argue almost anybody is being in the mix for a playoff spot, down to maybe 25. Hard for me to make the argument from Philadelphia on. But again, that's some of the fun of preseason and of that early part of the season where everybody feels like they're in this. Number 19, Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Penguins. An interesting offseason. They clearly still want to be a playoff team. That seems to be the plan. And Crosby signed his extension. So Crosby, Malkin, Letang, none of them are going anywhere. And now it's a matter of making it work on the ice. I thought Malkin looked really good in that game against Ottawa. Clearly, that's preseason, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But for a Pittsburgh team that needs to get into the playoffs after missing 2 years in a row, I think they'll be in the mix. Number 18, the New York Islanders. So the New York Islanders, a team that made the playoffs this past season. I do have two teams sitting in the top 16 that did not make the playoffs this past year. And so that means that somebody gets bumped out, and it's the Islanders. But the Islanders, again, teams from here up, they're going to be right there. There's going to be some teams with, I think, 95 points. Probably the cutoff in both conferences. I'd be kind of surprised if it was less than that. I think we're going to see an interesting little year. So some teams that are probably pretty good will end up missing. Number 17, Kings. The road for the Kings gets a lot more difficult without Drew Doughty. Drew Doughty, still one of the best defensemen in the NHL. I'm going to throw in here, too. I thought it was kind of funny that when I did the jersey rankings last night, somebody thought that because I showed the purple jersey for the Kings, that I was saying that was the best jersey in NHL history, which, no. That was for the average jerseys made per team. Like, this team makes, really... Generally, they have the best jerseys. But anyways... and since I'm using that crown logo puck for the Kings, it just came to mind there. So that's the bottom 16. So everybody sufficiently angry? Good. Cool. Fine. Number 16. I've tempered my expectations a bit with New Jersey. Just too many injuries in the preseason. And so we'll see how things go, but the fact that it seems to be affecting the blue line, it's one of those things I'm concerned with. But I still have New Jersey in the top half of the board. I still think they're going to be pretty darn good. We'll see if going over to Europe and playing the first two games of the season in Europe negatively impacts them. It has in the past with some teams where they get off to a bit of a rough patch. Remember, it was Nashville that weren't they playing well when overseas, and then it was kind of a mess when they came back. So we'll see how things go for the Devils, but I've got them at 16. At 15, as a result of New Jersey dropping, that moves Detroit up to 15. And again, I've seen all the negativity about Detroit. No, Yzerman sucks, and this is just taking too long. But if you look at the Detroit Red Wings stats, where they've been in the standings, they've been slowly moving up. I understand it's too slow for some, that they want the improvement to go faster. But they have been generally improving year over year. I don't see any reason why they can't improve this season as well. So I think Detroit should end up being a playoff team. But again, there's that should in there because we just don't know. It's the beauty of a brand new season. It's just this blank canvas, and you have no idea if you're going to get this beautiful, fantastic painting, wonderful, or it's just going to be like a mud derby down in Louisiana. It just a complete mess. But anyways, Detroit number 50. There have been seasons that have been a mess. Number 14 on the board, Capitals. Washington, 14th on the board. And it's interesting too because the Capitals made the playoffs and maybe they shouldn't have. And I say maybe because the way that they made the playoffs through regulation wins, that's how the NHL set it up. But maybe it would have been a more entertaining first round if it was Detroit that was in there instead of Washington or Flyers even. But Washington, I think they've improved in the offseason. I love the Logan Thompson addition. So I'm keeping Washington in the top half of the board. I think they did enough that they should be able to stay above the line. But keep in mind, these are all Eastern teams, and I think it's 9 Eastern and 7 Western. You guys can do the count. It's still technically off-season, those preseason, so I'm not that concerned at this time. Number 13. I want that part. I want this one. Boston. Boston without Jeremy Swayman, it is going to hurt them, I think. Korpisalo can be a good goaltender at times, but just I'm not that convinced with Boston. Like Lindholm and Zadorov, the contracts, I don't know if those are going to age great. And with Lindholm, I think they're asking a lot of Lindholm. So he better be back to being the Elias Lindholm he was, say, 5 years ago. Because if it's the same Elias Lindholm we saw in the regular season this past year, it could be a bit of a disappointment for Boston. He may end up being an effective second line or third line center, hopefully, he can live up to that contract out those first line minutes, and they can have that depth down the middle. The depth down the middle was big for Boston, but of course right now, goaltending. Number 12 on the board, Vegas. I don't see any reason Vegas can't have a good start to the season. I don't know if the Vegas Golden Knights end up staying 12th or higher on this board. I do have some questions about Vegas and their team and whatnot, so I don't have them in the top 10, but they should still be in the mix when it comes to playoffs. And so, yeah, I have no problem with having Vegas in 12th place. Number 11 on the board. Based on the Demko situation, and just based on some of the feeling around the Canucks, I'm going to start them this season at 11, which is still above the playoff line, and ahead of Boston. So there you go. But for Vancouver, I do have some concerns that just have me adjusting down my expectations a little bit with the Vancouver Canucks. Still a playoff team. Should absolutely be one of, I think, the top 2 teams in the Pacific. But there's a lot that has to go right, and they really need Demko back healthy. Number 10, Toronto Maple Leafs. So the Maple Leafs, top 10 team. I think they're still a top 10 team in the NHL. We'll see what happens with Marner. We'll see what happens with Tavares. We'll see if they get off to really good starts or if they get off to quiet starts. And then we can have the debate about why are they so quiet? Is it their contracts? And then you can start throwing microphones in their faces and asking them if they're distracted. So number 10, I'm putting Toronto there. I think that if they can find a way to keep Max Pacioretty around, that might end up being a good move. That being said, it's PTOs. You never know. Guys on PTOs, some of the ones you don't even really consider to be a big deal make it, and sometimes the big names don't. So we'll see what Toronto does. But while I do have some concern a little bit when it comes to their goaltending, I think Woll's going to be good enough. I think they're going to score enough goals as well. Toronto, it's going to come down to the playoffs. That's where people really start to pay attention. Number 9, Tampa Bay Lightning. So Tampa Bay just outside the top row. I know there are those who think I'm overrating Tampa, but they've still got Vasilevsky. They've still got Kucherov. They've still got Hedman. They just added Gensel. They've still got Point. You've got Hagel. This is not a team of scrubs. This is a team of pretty darn good players. And I think while losing Sergachev hurts, they still got Mosier in that deal. And Connor Geekie has looked good in the preseason. So the Tampa Bay Lightning may end up surprising some people. I don't know if they're still like a top contender for the Stanley Cup, but I think they're still in that contender conversation. And so I have no problem having them in the top 10. And keep in mind, this is not like a Stanley Cup prediction. This is just for, okay, this is where I think the teams are at right now to start the year. Number 8 on the board. In the top row, Winnipeg Jets. The Jets get into the top 8. We'll see if they stay there. The Jets, I kind of torn on a bit because the way that things kind of fell apart in that first round against Colorado, I don't think you can just write that off. That was a tough loss in the playoffs. One thing that comes to mind is 2017. Nashville upset Chicago. Chicago the following season, the bottom fell out. So it can happen where playoffs can tell you if a team is due for a bit of a drop. For me with Winnipeg, I think 8th is a good spot for them. We'll see once the season gets rolling if that is in fact the case. Number 7 on the board. The Canes. Carolina, number 7. So in the top row. I still think Carolina's a good team. I still think that Carolina's going to win their share of games. Yes, they've lost some players, but they've also picked up some players as well. So I think Carolina's capable of winning maybe a few more games than the doubters think. They may not be as good as some of the Caniacs think. So I think 7th is a good spot. Number 6 on the board. Nashville. So Nashville, I'm putting in the top row. I'm putting them as high as 6th. I think that you've got Stamkos, you got Marchessault. I think they're going to start the season strong. I think that Saros, is an excellent goaltender. He had a tough first half last season. Maybe he has a bit of a bounce back for the first half this season. So we'll see how Nashville does. But we know defensively Nashville's usually pretty good. And now they've beefed up their attack with Stamkos and Marchessault. Number 5. So we get into the top 5. This is where things get serious, right? Number 5, Colorado. The Avs, still a contending team. They lost in the second round against Dallas. Dallas is a contending team. I think Dallas and Colorado should be the top 2 teams in the division. Obviously, the division's pretty good because you got 4 teams from the Central in the top row. Bottom row has 2 in the bottom row. So we might have a bit of a separation between the top and the bottom of the division, depending on how things go. If I'm at all accurate, which normally, spoiler alert, normally this is the least accurate power rankings of the season because we haven't played the regular season yet. So it's just kind of an estimation of here's the starting point. And so for Colorado, I have them at 5. Number 4, New York Rangers. The Rangers, the way they lost in the playoffs, probably pretty frustrating to Ranger fans. They get close. This twice now they've been in the conference finals, not been able to get past that. I think they're due. I think the Rangers are due. It's been a long time. I still remember the 1940 chants and people saying they'd never win one, and then they won in 94. And now I'm seeing, well, they won in 94, but they're never going to win again, not with this team. And eventually, I think they do. I don't know if this is going to be the year or not. They have to get Igor figured out. They've got to get Igor signed. If that becomes a distraction, the Rangers could have a tough year. Number 3 is my Stanley Cup pick, Dallas. So, how in the world could THG pick Dallas to win the Stanley Cup, and yet he's got them 3rd on the power rankings? Because power rankings doesn't necessarily equal a Stanley Cup pick. And the team that wins the Stanley Cup in June is not always the team that's playing the best in October. I still think the defending Stanley Cup champions and the Stanley Cup finalists deserve the top 2 spots. And that obviously changes once we start playing regular season games. But also, I don't see that Florida or Edmonton have really been weakened going into this season. Florida's lost a couple of guys, sure, but they've still got all the core there, and all of their main weapons are still there. So I don't see any reason to put Dallas ahead of either Edmonton or Florida. I think that would definitely look biased, and I can't argue that it wouldn't be biased for me to try to argue Dallas over those teams. So number 2, the Edmonton Oilers, defending Stanley Cup finalists, and as Stanley Cup finalists, they sell off all this stuff, so I make sure that I get stuff like this, and then I can throw my can of soda in here. Let me just do that real quick here. Just throw that in there. So this way, I can drink from a can that says Stanley Cup finalists, what Edmonton Oilers won, and read comments about how, well, he's biased against the Oilers because he hates the Oilers, and, cheers. So there's that. And then, there's the Stanley Cup winner hats that I get every year. And then there's the Stanley Cup champion puck. Florida. Stanley Cup champs. So Florida gets the number 1 spot. I understand that there are some names that are out of the locker room. But if you look at the subtractions and look at the additions, I don't think Florida's going to be less dangerous. For me, when I'm looking at the Stanley Cup and I'm looking and thinking to myself like that far ahead of, okay, could Florida win again? It is really hard to go to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. Ask Tampa. It takes a lot out of you to play that extra hockey 3 years in a row. And so I do think Florida could have a really strong start. I think they are the strongest team in the league, and it's going to be up to everybody else in the league to prove they can hang at that level. But yeah, your Stanley Cup champs. I'll go ahead and grab this puck here and show it again. Florida, number 1 on the power rankings to start the season. So that's the official start to the season power rankings. I understand the Florida puck's hard to see, but I'll figure that all out when we get to the next one, right? But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as I know people do and people will. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. It is great to have the puck board back. It is great to have power rankings back. And on, I guess, the 12th, we'll have the first power rankings of the regular season. This is just considered to be the starting point. And then beyond that, it will be results based. So thank you guys so much for all your support as always. If you haven't already hit like and subscribe, please do. And I will talk to you again soon.